The lecture hall was filled with the hum of eager students, each focused on their notes and the professor's words. The high ceilings and polished floors reflected the prestigious atmosphere of the university, one that made anyone stepping inside feel both intimidated and inspired. At the back of the room, Marcus sat trying his best to blend in, though he couldn't help but feel the eyes of some of his classmates on him. He was used to being one of the few black students in a class full of elite scholars. He wasn't here by luck. He had earned his place. Yet, in a room full of sharp minds and well-established professors, Marcus often felt out of place. He felt the weight of being different, even though he worked just as hard, if not harder, than everyone else. Today, Marcus had been waiting for this moment. He had poured everything into his final project for Professor Carter, one of the most respected and feared professors in the department. It wasn't just a regular assignment. This project could make or break his future. He had stayed up late nights, pushing himself beyond his limits. The topic was challenging, but he was determined to impress not just for his grade, but to prove that he deserved to be here. Professor Carter, with his stern face and sharp eyes, sat at the front of the room, waiting. The moment had come. "Marcus," Professor Carter called, his voice booming across the room. "Let's hear your presentation." Marcus stood up, adjusting his glasses nervously. He felt the weight of everyone's gaze on him. He cleared his throat, trying to steady his nerves. As he walked to the front of the room, his heart raced, but he focused on the task at hand. This was his time to shine. "Good afternoon, everyone. My project is focused on," Marcus began. But as soon as he opened his mouth, he felt an unexpected interruption. Professor Carter raised his hand. "Wait," he said, cutting Marcus off mid-sentence. "This is what you've been working on." Marcus froze for a moment, unsure of what had just happened. The entire class fell silent, eyes trained on the professor. "Yes, Professor," Marcus responded, his voice steady despite the sudden rush of nerves. Professor Carter raised an eyebrow. "It's underwhelming." He glanced at the projected slides on the screen behind Marcus. "This topic is overdone. You've chosen a subject that's been explored 1,000 times before. Your work lacks originality." Marcus's breath caught in his throat. His hands suddenly felt clammy, and he could feel the heat rising in his cheeks. He had expected criticism, sure, but this? He had worked tirelessly on this project, dedicating countless hours to refining every detail. His project wasn't perfect, but it was solid. It was his best work. The students in the room exchanged glances, some whispering to each other. The laughter started, quiet at first, like the murmur of a distant storm. A couple of students giggled, and Marcus could feel their eyes on him. They had already judged him. He was just another student who couldn't measure up. "I don't see anything new here, Marcus. This is not the standard I expect from someone at this level. I expected more from you." Professor Carter's voice was cold, dismissive. The words stung. They cut deeper than Marcus had anticipated. He had poured his heart and soul into this project, and now it felt like everything he had worked for was being ripped apart in front of him. The laughter continued, and the weight of it pressed down on him like a heavy cloud. His confidence, the small spark of belief he had in himself, wavered. He wanted to say something, anything to defend his work. But as he looked around the room, at the students who were supposed to be his peers, he felt smaller and smaller. He had never felt so exposed. Professor Carter wasn't finished yet. He turned to the class, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This isn't how we approach research at this university. It's clear that Marcus needs to rethink his approach entirely." He waved his hand dismissively. "You can sit down, Marcus. We'll talk later." Marcus nodded silently, his heart pounding in his chest. He slowly turned around and walked back to his seat. As he did, he could feel the eyes of every student on him. The whispers, the stares, the quiet judgment. It all stung. When he sat down, he didn't look up. He couldn't. The silence in the room was deafening. The only sound was the shuffling of papers and the soft clicks of keyboards as the students tried to refocus. Marcus sank into his seat, the weight of the moment crashing down on him. He wanted to disappear. He had tried so hard to prove himself, and now he felt like he had failed in front of everyone. Every ounce of confidence he had built up over the semester had been shattered. He had never felt so small, so worthless. The seconds felt like hours, and the laughter from his classmates echoed in his mind. What had he done wrong? How could he fix this? Marcus took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He had to fight back, but how? Would he let this moment define him? Would he let their judgment become his truth? The camera zooms in on Marcus's face as he stares down at his hands. His mind races. The question lingers. The hallway outside the lecture hall, empty except for the low hum of the fluorescent lights above. After the brutal class, Marcus walked out of the lecture hall, his head held low. The harsh words of Professor Carter still rang in his ears, drowning out the chatter of his classmates. He didn't want to look at them. He didn't want to feel their eyes on him, watching as he tried to hold himself together. As he walked through the hallway, his steps felt heavier with each passing moment. The once vibrant energy of the university now seemed distant, like it belonged to someone else. He passed by other students, who briefly glanced at him before looking away, no doubt, already whispering about the failure they had just witnessed. Marcus didn't want to hear it. He could already feel the sting of their judgment. He reached the elevator and stepped inside. The door closed with a soft ding, and Marcus leaned against the back wall, staring at the floor. His heart felt like it was in his throat. The embarrassment was suffocating. He wanted to shout, to cry, to tell someone how unfair it all was, but there was no one to turn to. When he finally reached his dorm room, he stood at the door for a moment, gathering the strength to go inside. His mother had texted him earlier, asking how things were going. He knew she'd expect an answer, but he didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. She believed in him so much, and he hated the thought of disappointing her. Marcus unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was quiet, and it felt like a hollow shell. The once bustling energy of university life felt like a distant memory now. His textbooks lay on the desk, untouched. His computer screen was dim, casting a faint glow on the room. But none of it mattered. He wasn't focused on the work he needed to do. He wasn't focused on the future. He opened his phone and stared at the text from his mother. "How's my favorite college student doing today? I'm so proud of you." He almost couldn't bring himself to reply. His throat tightened. The last thing he wanted to do was tell her that everything he'd worked for, everything he'd sacrificed, had just been torn apart in front of the entire class. For a long time, Marcus just stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keys. He felt like a failure, like everything he had worked for had just crumbled. The doubts that had been creeping in before now took over, clouding his thoughts. Maybe Professor Carter was right. Maybe he wasn't cut out for this field. Maybe he wasn't as smart as he thought. Finally, he typed, "It's been a tough day. I'll explain later." He set the phone down, still staring at the screen, the words feeling like a lie. He couldn't explain it to her. Not yet. She wouldn't understand how deep the humiliation went. She wouldn't understand how small he felt. Marcus sat down on the bed, running a hand through his hair. He had always prided himself on being resilient, on being able to handle challenges. But this was different. This wasn't just about academic struggle or failure. It felt like something deeper. It felt like his very worth was being questioned. As the evening went on, Marcus became more and more consumed by the humiliation. The laughter from his classmates echoed in his mind. He could hear their whispers, their judgment. He could feel their eyes, their quiet mockery. Just when it seemed like the weight of it all would crush him, a strange feeling began to stir inside him. Something within him refused to let go of that sliver of hope. The tiny voice that still believed he could prove them all wrong. But how? How could he fight back against this overwhelming wave of doubt? Then, just as he was about to sink into despair, he received an unexpected message. It was from one of the professors, the same one who had humiliated him earlier. "Marcus, I need to speak with you. Urgently." The message was short, cryptic, and left him feeling both confused and anxious. What did this mean? Was it a trap, or was it an opportunity? Marcus's heart raced as he stared at the screen. He had no idea what this meeting could be about, but one thing was clear. This moment, this invitation, could change everything. Was it the professor's attempt to fix his mistake, or was something else going on? What did the professor want with him now after everything that had just happened? Suspense. Marcus took a deep breath and stared at the message. Should he go? Was this his chance to prove himself, or was it another attempt to tear him down? Could he afford to risk another humiliation? Or was this the moment he had been waiting for to turn things around? The university's faculty office, dimly lit with bookshelves lined with academic journals. Marcus paced back and forth in his dorm room, staring at the professor's message on his phone. His mind raced as he tried to figure out why, after everything that had happened, Professor Carter would want to speak with him. Had the professor changed his mind about the humiliation in class? Or was this yet another opportunity to break him down even further? With his heart pounding in his chest, Marcus made the decision to go. He knew he had to face this head-on, whether it was to get answers or to finally prove that he wasn't the failure everyone thought he was. Arriving at the faculty building, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The halls were eerily quiet, the only sound being his footsteps echoing off the polished floors. He reached Professor Carter's office and knocked on the door. The professor's voice called from inside. "Come in, Marcus." Marcus took a deep breath and turned the handle. The office was as cold and impersonal as he remembered, but this time it felt different. There was no smugness in the professor's eyes, no judgment. Instead, the professor was sitting behind his desk, looking unusually serious. "Please have a seat," Professor Carter said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Marcus hesitated for a moment before sitting down. The tension between them was palpable. He didn't know what to expect, but he could feel the weight of the moment. This conversation could change everything. Professor Carter studied him for a moment, then leaned forward. "I owe you an apology," he said. "What happened in class today was wrong. I let my frustrations get the best of me and I crossed a line. You deserve better." Marcus blinked, surprised. This was not the reaction he expected. He had prepared himself for more criticism, more humiliation, but instead he was hearing something completely different. "I've been a professor for a long time," Professor Carter continued, "but I've never been more ashamed of how I treated a student. I see something in you that I didn't see before. I was wrong to dismiss you, and I want to make it right." Marcus sat in stunned silence. Was this really happening? Was Professor Carter actually admitting his mistake? The professor paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I've seen the potential in your work. I've seen the dedication you put into your research, and it's clear that you're capable of more than what I allowed you to show. But there's something else. I need your help with a project, one that could change the direction of this department, maybe even the university, and I want you to be a part of it." Marcus was still processing everything the professor was saying. "What kind of project?" he asked, his voice tentative. Professor Carter smiled for the first time. "I can't go into too much detail yet, but it's big, very big, and I want you to lead it." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. Lead a project? Him? The same student who had been publicly humiliated just hours before? "I know this sounds like a lot to take in," Professor Carter said, his voice softening. "But you've got the talent, the intelligence, and the drive. You just need the opportunity to show it. This project could be the chance you've been waiting for." The words hung in the air. Marcus felt a mixture of emotions, shock, disbelief, excitement, but most of all, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was his moment to prove everyone wrong. Maybe this was his chance to take control of his future. He took a deep breath and looked up at Professor Carter. "I don't know what to say," Marcus said, his voice shaky but filled with determination. "This is everything I've worked for. I believe in you, Marcus. the professor said, his tone steady. "This is your chance to show everyone that you belong here." Marcus's mind spun as he processed the weight of what was being offered. This could be his redemption. This could be the moment where everything turned around. But even as hope stirred within him, doubt still lingered. Was this a genuine opportunity, or was the professor simply trying to make up for his past mistakes? Could he really lead a project of this magnitude? And if he failed, would this only add to the humiliation? Suspense. The offer was too good to be true. Marcus was standing at a crossroads, the future hanging in the balance. Was this the breakthrough he had been waiting for, or was it another trap waiting to crush him? He had to decide. Would he take the risk and step up, or would he retreat into the shadows of his failure? The next day, Marcus sat in the audience of the auditorium, feeling a strange mix of anxiety and excitement. Professor Carter had given him the responsibility of leading the new project, but there was one catch. Marcus had to present his ideas to the entire faculty and staff at the upcoming university conference. The stakes were higher than ever. If he succeeded, it would not only validate his place in the academic world, but it would also silence the critics who had doubted him from the very beginning. But if he failed, it would be the final nail in his coffin. Everyone would remember him as the student who couldn't live up to the pressure, the student who had been humiliated in front of everyone. The auditorium buzzed with chatter as Marcus walked to the front of the room, holding his presentation materials. His palms were sweaty, his heart raced, and his mind kept flashing back to the cruel words of the professors who had doubted him. "You're not good enough," they'd said. "You'll never make it." Those words echoed in his head, trying to tear him down. But Marcus pushed them aside. This was his moment. He couldn't let fear stop him now. As he stood in front of the packed room, he glanced at Professor Carter, who nodded at him encouragingly. But even the professor's reassuring gesture couldn't calm the storm inside Marcus. The lights dimmed, and the spotlight focused on Marcus. He took a deep breath and began. "I know most of you have seen me fail. I know that many of you have written me off," he began, his voice steady but carrying an edge of raw emotion. "But I'm not here to apologize for what's happened in the past. I'm here to show you that I am capable of much more than you think." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. The tension in the room was palpable, but Marcus didn't falter. He launched into his presentation, speaking passionately about his ideas and the research he'd been working on. His voice grew, stronger with every passing minute, his confidence building as he spoke about the potential impact of the project. As he spoke, he could see the faces in the crowd change. At first they were skeptical, but gradually some of the professors began to nod. He could feel the shift, and it fueled him to keep going. "Some of you may have doubted me before," Marcus continued, looking directly at the professors who had humiliated him. "But this is my chance to prove that I belong here, to show that I'm not just another student trying to fit in. I'm someone who can change things, who can make a real impact." Marcus finished his presentation, his voice now calm but powerful. There was a moment of silence before the applause began, hesitant at first, then growing louder. It wasn't just polite applause, it was genuine. The faculty and students in the room were impressed, and for the first time, Marcus felt like he had earned their respect. But just as he thought he had made it, a familiar voice cut through the applause. Professor Blackwell, the one who had been the harshest in his criticism, stood up and addressed the room. "Impressive, Marcus," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But how do we know you can actually pull this off? How do we know you're not just another student with big ideas but no follow-through?" The room went quiet. The challenge had been thrown down, and Marcus could feel the weight of it. This was the moment when everything could go wrong. One misstep, one mistake, and his entire future could come crashing down. But Marcus wasn't about to back down now. He looked Professor Blackwell in the eye, his heart pounding in his chest, but his voice was steady. "You'll know by the results," he said simply. Because when this project succeeds, you'll see that I'm not just some student looking for validation. I'm someone who's ready to prove what I'm capable of." The room was silent. For a moment, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Then, to Marcus's surprise, Professor Carter stood up, giving him a supportive nod. "I believe in Marcus," Professor Carter said firmly, "and I believe this project will be a success. It's time we stopped underestimating him." For the first time, Marcus felt a sense of relief. It wasn't just about proving himself to the professors anymore. It was about taking control of his destiny. The rest of the room erupted into applause, and Marcus felt a sense of victory. But the real test was still ahead. Suspense. Despite the applause, Marcus knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. He had won the battle, but the war was far from over. With a huge project on his shoulders and a target on his back, could he live up to the promises he'd made? And how long could he keep up this newfound confidence before everything came crashing down? Marcus had given everything to the project. Weeks of sleepless nights, endless research, and countless hours in the lab had finally paid off. The data was in, and it was promising. But the final test remained, presenting the results to the professors, especially the ones who had always doubted him. Professor Blackwell was the main one, and Marcus knew that no matter how well the project turned out, Blackwell would find a flaw. He always did. As he entered the lab that evening, the weight of his task hung heavy on his shoulders. His classmates had already begun the process of refining their parts of the project, but Marcus was still alone in the corner, piecing everything together. He needed this to work, not just for his academic success, but for his personal redemption. It had been the target of ridicule for far too long, and now he had one shot at proving them wrong. The lab was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of machines, as Marcus adjusted the final components of his presentation. He double-checked the results, his hands shaking slightly. Every part had to be perfect. He couldn't afford any mistakes. As the hours ticked by, a sense of unease settled in the pit of his stomach. The pressure was immense. His mind replayed the harsh criticisms of the past, the cruel jabs from his professors, the sneers from classmates. It felt as though all of it was riding on this one moment. As he prepared the data for the presentation, the door to the lab creaked open. He didn't have to turn around to know who it was. It was Professor Blackwell, standing in the doorway, with a smug look on his face. "You still think you can pull this off, Marcus?" Blackwell's voice was cold, dripping with disbelief. "You do realize this project could fail spectacularly. You have no idea what you're really dealing with, do you?" Marcus took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. His heart raced, but he refused to let the doubt show. "I know exactly what I'm doing, Professor. This is my moment to prove myself." Blackwell stepped into the lab, his eyes scanning the room. "Prove yourself? Or are you just trying to cover up your incompetence?" He took a few steps closer, his gaze never leaving Marcus. "You think your little project is going to impress anyone? What makes you so special?" Marcus clenched his fists, but he didn't back down. "I've put in the work. The results speak for themselves." Professor Blackwell let out a laugh, shaking his head. "The results? What do you even know about results, Marcus? You've spent your whole life playing catch-up, but this is different. You're in over your head." The words stung. But Marcus refused to let them break him. He had worked too hard for this. He had already proven himself to the rest of the faculty and students. Now it was time to prove that he could rise above the negativity, the doubts, and the taunts. "I've spent my whole life proving people wrong," Marcus said, his voice steady but firm. "And I'm not stopping now. This project is going to succeed. It will prove that I am capable no matter what you or anyone else thinks." Professor Blackwell's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, his voice low. "We'll see about that, won't we?" He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Marcus standing there, his heart racing. The room felt colder now, the weight of the challenge bearing down on him. But instead of succumbing to the fear, Marcus tightened his grip on his notes. He had come too far to back down now. Suspense. The countdown to the presentation day was closing in, and Marcus knew this was his one chance. Could he truly succeed where everyone expected him to fail? Would Blackwell's words haunt him, or would Marcus rise above them and prove that he was more than just a student trying to fit in? With everything on the line, the next move was crucial. Would the project be the success he'd hoped for, or would it unravel before his eyes? The big day had arrived. Marcus stood in front of a packed auditorium, the tension in the air palpable. The professors, including the ever-critical Professor Blackwell, sat at the front, their eyes fixed on him. Marcus could feel his palms sweating, but he pushed the nerves aside. He had worked too hard for this moment, and now there was no turning. Big E, his project was set up on the screen behind him. The audience waited for him to begin, and Marcus took a deep breath before launching into his presentation. He spoke with clarity and confidence, presenting his findings and explaining the intricacies of his research. As he moved through each point, he saw the skeptical looks on the faces of some professors begin to change. They leaned in, their attention fully on him. But then, just as he reached the most critical part of the project, something unexpected happened. Professor Blackwell raised his hand. The room went silent. Everyone knew that Blackwell's approval was hard to get, and his criticism could make or break a student's career. "Marcus," Blackwell said, his tone dripping with condescension, "you've made some impressive claims here, but I have to ask, what makes you think this will work in the real world? You've presented theory, but where's the practical application?" Marcus could feel his heart skip a beat. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his response. But instead of faltering, Marcus stepped forward, meeting Blackwell's gaze. "This project isn't just theory," Marcus said calmly. "It's about taking risks. It's about thinking outside the box. You may not see it now, but when this project is implemented, it will change the way we think about the future of technology. This is just the beginning." There was a moment of silence. For a second, Marcus wasn't sure what would happen next. But then, something incredible occurred. A few other professors, previously quiet, began nodding in agreement. They looked at Blackwell, and a few exchanged words under their breath. Marcus took that as his cue and moved on with his presentation. His confidence grew with each passing moment. He was no longer just a student. He was someone who believed in his work and was ready to show the world that he had what it took. As he concluded his presentation, the audience remained silent for a few moments, digesting what they had just seen. Then, a slow clap started from the back of the auditorium. Marcus turned around, surprised to see a professor from a different department applauding. One by one, more professors joined in, until the entire room was clapping. Marcus felt his chest swell with pride. The applause wasn't just for the success of his project. It was for everything he had fought for. The endless hours of work, the criticisms he had faced, and the doubts he had overcome. This was his moment, the validation he had longed for. But it wasn't just the applause that left him speechless. It was the look on Professor Blackwell's face. For the first time, the man who had constantly belittled him was speechless. Blackwell stood there, his arms crossed, his face a mask of disbelief. It was clear that Marcus had earned his respect. Something that seemed impossible just days ago. Suspense. As the applause died down and Marcus walked off the stage, he couldn't help but wonder, had this victory changed everything for him? Would the professors finally recognize him for his abilities, or would Blackwell's disdain still linger? One thing was certain. Marcus had proven that his hard work and perseverance could not be ignored, but the road ahead was still uncertain. What would be next for him now that he had earned this unexpected triumph?